Hello and welcome to this section on the APR 2012-13 video training. This section is going to deal with cost improvement plans, and at first I need to make a distinction between cost improvement plans and income generation CIPs, which is a term widely used. An income generation CIP I would understand to be a scheme that would generate extra income for the trust at costs less than that income, whereas a cost improvement plan or a pure CIP is something I would understand to be a scheme that would reduce the expenditure of the trust. We have two different sheets for the two different types of schemes. Revenue generation schemes, or income CIPs as you may know them, have a sheet for them. In this I'm going to concentrate on actual CIPs, or cost improvement plans, which are schemes to reduce the expenditure of the trust. Right. As per all the other sheets, the layout is that the top is a summation of what goes beneath. What goes beneath is a set of 12 different identical areas in which you can enter the name and the financial impacts you expect from a cost improvement plan. Since expenditure throughout the model is negative, a decrease in expenditure would be positive here. There are 12 different entries. That does not mean that we expect to see 12 different CIPs. We certainly don't want people asking for extra lines. If you have more than that, please amalgamate the minor CIPs into more major lines. If you have less than 12 CIPs, that's entirely a decision for your trusts. Just enter them with a brief description that matches some description that you've used in your strategic plan that will tell us exactly what these financial figures are describing. Okay, the other new factor this year is that in each expense line which exists, pay, drugs, clinical supplies, non-clinical supplies, miscellaneous, other operating and non-operating CIPs, there is a split between recurrent and non-recurrent savings. And in fact, there might be recurrent extra costs and or non-recurrent extra costs and then recurrent savings. Let me just illustrate that by putting in some numbers. Say that we have a scheme to change a supplier for clinical supplies, and therefore we are going to have 0.2 less expenditure, so that's positive in this year, but there's going to be a setup costs of extra 0.3. So this may not be typical, but this is to show the effect. You can see the summation up here. The net effect on drugs over the year is 0.5, the saving is 0.8, the extra cost is 0.3. Now if we actually go to an expense sheet, you can see how that feeds through. If we go to the clinical suppliers sheet and we go up to the CIPs, see there are recurrent CIPs which save 0.8 because on here costs would be negative, and the non-recurrent extra costs of 0.3. So let me demonstrate that a little more clearly. If I go to the income statement and I put in the previous year's drugs costs, which were say 15 million, then we go back to the drugs calculation. It says you're starting the year with a drugs cost of 15 million. Pardon me, that should have been clinical supplies. If we go over to clinical supplies, in the SOCI, put in a cost of 15 million. Then go back to see the effect of the CIP. The costs in the previous year are 15 million. The effect of the CIP is to decrease it by $500,000 in the year. So your costs are only 14.5 million. But some of that was a one-off cost of 0.3 million, and that is removed in the next year. so that your baseline costs are even lower. They were 14.5, but of that, a 0.3 was a one-off cost, and therefore your baseline cost going forward are 14.2. So there you can see the effect on an expense line of a revenue, not a revenue generation scheme, of a CIP. And similarly, different CIPs can be entered in here. The totals will be generated here, and we ask you for a few extra lines here. This cell we're asking you for the split between recurrent and non-recurrent CIPs in the previous year. And if you have CIPs which are not yet decided how they will be implemented, but savings are within the CIP total, then you need to analyze that in this line, please, because unless you do so, it will assume that you do not have detailed plans, or you just have an outlined plan for that amount, and it would be better if we could see that you actually have detailed plans for these amounts. Hence, input on that line. Right, thank you very much. The other thing, to mention is that these items are your CIPs for the prior year. In prior year, we didn't collect a split into recurrent and non-recurrent. We're not asking you for that split now. We are, however, asking you for totals. So if you put in that last year's clinical expense saving was 1, then that will inform the CIPs sheet here, and then we will have a proper comparator between CIPs from last year and CIPs from this year, and without that your trust is likely to flag up as having a very large change in CIPs. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this.